Hey everybody, it's your girl Urban Farm Sister. Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to my broadcast. I'll give everybody a few minutes just to log in. Thank you guys for tuning in this evening. It's nice, almost summer evening here in June. It's nice and kind of cool today here in Ohio. Um, yeah, we had some 90-degree temperatures last week, but now we're down in the 70s. But anyway, so I'll give everybody a few more seconds to log in, and then we'll get started. All right, so this evening we're going to talk about how to write a grant proposal. Um, you know, I see a lot of grants being offered lately for multiple things, whether it's COVID-19, whether it's, urban farming, um, medical supplies, all types of stuff. There's a lot of grants being offered, but I know there's a lot of people that don't know how to write up an actual proposal and how to respond to those, requests for proposals or requests for announcements and things like that. So I'm just going to cover um, what's a grant, uh, what different types of grants are, and things like that, as well as what are the parts of a grant, and then if you go to my school website, I'll actually have a sample grant that I found on the internet that might be useful for you to look over if you're writing up a proposal. So welcome everyone that's signing in. Hello, D Griffin. How are you? Hi, Kyra. How you doing this evening? All right. Before we get started, I want to thank some of my contributors, Chandler Glover. I also wanted to thank Dee and Lorraine. Thank you guys for contributing to my channel. If you'd like to support my channel, you can do so by using one of these methods. You can use my PayPal, which is nadiaruffin@gmail.com, or you can use Cash App. My Cash App is $ Nadia Ruffin, or you can become a patron. On Patreon, you can visit patreon.com, Urban Farm Sister, and become a patron. And what'll happen is you'll have you'll support my channel. It'll be a monthly withdrawal that'll come out of your account, but it'll go towards supporting my channel. I thank you guys that are actually supporting my channel. It's allowing me to keep this content coming. Um, it also allows me to pay for things like to be able to stream these videos live, as well as doing the research and things like that. So thank you to my contributors. Also, if you still like to donate, I still have my agracademy.com. I'm sorry, agracademyinc.org/farming campaign going on. Farming is essential. I'd like to thank our recent donors, Beth Gill, Madeline Solovsky, Alana Goldstein, Ali Lewis, Fury, Marlo Muhammad, Kim Edwards, Darnell Smith, and I had an anonymous donor that they wanted to remain anonymous. So thank you guys for contributing to my campaign. What I'm doing is I'm doing a farming project that's going to actually help put more produce and things into the food chain here in Cincinnati, Ohio. And this campaign was set up because I need to buy some farm equipment, one being a large size tractor, because I'll be actually farming acres of land this year. So if you'd like to contribute to that, please do so by going to www.agracademyinc.org/farming. All right, a little bit about myself. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Nadia Ruffin. I'm located in Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm an entomologist, scientist, farmer, researcher, and educator. I have 2 degrees. I have a bachelor's of science from the Ohio State University in agriculture. My focus was animal sciences, pre-veterinary medicine, and entomology. Um, I also have a master's of science from the University of Nebraska in entomology. So that's, I'm an entomologist. Entomologist is a person that studies insects. I'm an owner of Kiwi Produce and Agri Academy Inc. Kiwi Produce is an urban farm that I developed here in Cincinnati on an empty lot that I purchased. Agri Academy Inc. is a nonprofit organization that I started to teach people about the different career options as well as other opportunities that are in the agriculture industry that are not just farming. Um, I'm also co-owner of Agri Academy Labs, where we focus on biotechnology, entomological services, and also technology services. Like I said, I'm an urban farmer. I grow here in the city in hydroponics as well as in soil. I teach hydroponics classes, aquaponics classes, and then I also have bees, so I'm a beekeeper, and I teach beekeeping as well as keeping chickens and things like that on urban or small, tracts of land. So, I have years of experience in floriculture. My family owns a flower shop here called Blossoms Florist, so I'm very, well versed in floristry, as well as the floral industry. I have a background in veterinary and medical research. I've worked in different labs, University of Georgia. I've worked at the Ohio State University, University of Cincinnati, and I've also worked at the Ohio Department of Agriculture. Before I became full time doing my own business and things, I was a disease investigator with Hamilton County Public Health, where I did disease investigations here for the county. So that's where a lot of that, um, when you see me talking about different diseases like COVID-19 and things like that, that's where that came from because that's what I used to do as a career. All right, so we're gonna get started about talking about grants and things because I always hear people tell people like, "Oh, just go apply for a grant," and I don't think they really understand the depth of what actually goes into applying for grants and things like that. Um, So, who can actually apply for grants? Well, there's individuals that can apply for a grant, there's businesses, there's nonprofits, other organizations that are tax exempt, um, that are most common. There are some like churches and things, they don't always have to have that tax exemption to apply for a grant, but for the most part, nonprofits, you have to have that 501(c)(3) or one of those 501 type tax exemption statuses. Um, Also, fiscal sponsors, and I'll talk about what each one of these are and what things they can actually apply for. So individuals, there are grants for individuals, but you must really search for these. They're not very common. They also don't usually offer a lot of money. It might be like $1,000, maybe up to $10,000. There's not a lot of grants for individuals. Um, they're commonly used to start a project though. So if you do find one, a lot of times they're for an individual that may want to start some, community-based project or, you know, uh, some maybe they're in their church and they see a need that needs to be met and they want to start this project in a church or they work at a job and they want to, focus on a particular project or program. They can apply for these grants that are available for individuals. A lot of times they're for people that are trying to create a product, or say you're an artist or a photographer or a videographer. There's a lot of individual grants for those types of people. um Say you're a person that's like really into some type of research and you're just needing like a few extra dollars to maybe buy some equipment or something. An individual grant may go towards that. Also, if you're doing a project or a program and you have to do traveling, sometimes there's grants for individuals that cover traveling. So there's different individual grants. They're just hard to find. Because I'm talking about the ones that are most common in a minute. But I know there's one site. It's called the Pollination Project. It has nothing to do with bees or any type of pollinators. But if you go there, I think it's the pollinationproject.org. They offer $1,000 grant to individuals, but your project has to fall in line with what they ask for on their website. Like they're really, this ground roots type organization. They're really pro like, animal rights and or community based targeting. Something that may target like a community that's in disparity or something like that. I think they might have had some COVID-19 grants coming up, if you're trying to do some projects in COVID-19. But I know for the most part, their maximum amount is usually $1,000. But that's just one of many. if you go on the internet and search for individual grants, sometimes like your local, maybe your city council or your local governments or your local foundations and things may offer grants for individuals. All right. So I always hear people say, "Oh, just if you're trying to start a business, they always tell you, oh, just get a business grant." You know, the government offers all types of business grants, and we're gonna talk about government grants at the as the last option on here. But there's not a lot of business grants. For the most part, if you're going to start a business, they want you to take out a loan. So there's not a lot of business grants. So when somebody's telling you that and oh, you can get all this free money and this government money, they have not ever applied for a grant, number one. If they're telling you that, they've never actually even looked for one. Um, and now number two, the government just doesn't give free money for things. You have to apply for things. And a lot of times when it comes to grants for the government, I'm not going to say there aren't business grants that the other government doesn't offer. But for the most part, government grants are for like and we'll talk about it like foundations and nonprofits and things like that. Starting a business, they want you to take out loans so you can buy your equipment or your whatever you're going to do your project or your business in. They want you to take loans out. And so you're going to have to pay them back. They're not trying to really fund you as far as a business because you're trying to make a profit. And so you're trying to make a profit, they're going to want to make a profit off of you, and usually they want you to take out a loan so they can get interest. But if you do find business grants, a lot of times what they can be used for is to cover operating costs, to cover capital, maybe to cover purchasing inventory, uh, or some basic startup funds. Um, but for the most part, it's not going to cover your whole, starting your business. Um, you might want to check with your local foundations to even see if your city or government may offer, or your state government may offer grants for businesses. But I know there are some examples that do offer grants for businesses, and that's Royal Neighbors Foundation. It's a women's grant. Um, and I actually won this grant back in 2018. But it's for women businesses that are new businesses that started up, and you can win. I think it was $10,000 that I actually got for that grant. But you had to write up a whole business proposal. You had to fill out their application. You had to submit it. And then, they selected you based off all these national other people that applied. Um, like I said, they are out there. FedEx, they offer the small business grant contest every year. That's very competitive. I know like hundreds of thousands of people apply for that. And then they narrow it down by a voting system and all this stuff. So there are business grants out there. They're just very rare. So you're going to have to search for them, and you're going to have to make sure that your business meets the criteria that they're looking for. And a lot of times they want new businesses that have started within the last 5 years, or there might be a new startup. But you have to have like your business registered with your state. You got to have a name and things like that. So it can't just be like, oh, I just want to start a business, I'm going to apply for this grant. You have to kind of been established and actually operating for them to even consider your application. All right. So nonprofits. Most common entity to receive grants are nonprofits. So to become a nonprofit, you must register your organization with the state. So you have to go to your state's website, register the organization. I know here in Ohio, to register a new organization or a new business, it's $99. Every state is different. Um, and every state is different how long that actual registration lasts. But you're going to have to start there. Then you have to write up articles for your nonprofit organization. You're going to have to select the board. Then you got to apply for an EIN number. So you apply for an EIN number going to the government the IRS website, and you can apply for an EIN there. And it's very easy. You just type in your business, what type of business you are, um, the name of your business, and then they want to make sure that you're not doing any type of gambling and things like this and all that stuff. And then you submit it, and they'll ask you if you want to mail or if you want your EIN electronically. If you get it electronically, you can get that same day, like as soon as you push that button. Now, if you want it mailed, it's going to take some time to get to you. And so after you get the EIN, after you select your board, After you write up your articles, after you register it, you also want to open a bank account in the organization's name, but you can't open a bank account until you get that actual EIN. After you open a bank account, then you're going to want to apply for the 501c3 status. And I recommend using the Form 23EZ and not just Form 1023. The Form 23EZ is the easiest application on there. It costs $275 now. I know they always change the price. It used to be, I think, $500, then they dropped it down to 275. But the easy what it is it's an easy application. You can do it all online. um but what it requires you to, your organization can't make over $50,000 for the first 3 years of operation, so you have to stay within those parameters. Now there's no explanation on the website, on the IRS website, what happens if you go over that $50,000 as your operating budget. But um they want you to stay in that criteria so that you can uh, you know you can fill out that form. Now if your organization had been established and you're already making over $50,000, then you have to go with the 1023 form, which is a longer form, and then you have to mail it in and things like that, and you have to wait and get um, your 501c3 status. So once they approve you, then you get a letter. They'll email a letter to you, or you can get it mailed to you. And it'll have your 501c3 number on there that you can use when you're actually going, to collect donations and things like that. Um, but that's for nonprofit status. Now you can be a nonprofit without a 501c3. There's things like churches. There are nonprofit organizations that don't have it, but this 501c3 comes into play when you're trying to take donations and you're trying to get charitable donations so people can get tax write-offs. If you don't have that, it's going to have to be taxable, like income that you're getting, and so you have to take taxes and stuff out of that. So just be mindful that you can still be a nonprofit with 501c3, but then there's a different process that you have to go through if you're going to take donations. All right, so a fiscal sponsor. These are organizations with 501c3 status that offers their tax exemption status to individuals or organizations that do not have 501c3 status, so they can do the work, so they can work on a project. So, say you're a new organization, a new nonprofit, but you're waiting for your 501c3 status, but you see this grant you want to apply for, and it's due like today. You can hire another 501c3 uh, registered nonprofit that actually offers their 501c3 as a fiscal sponsorship. Now, with a fiscal sponsorship, what usually happens though is that other organization that's gonna, you know, apply for this grant on your behalf, they are going to charge you a fee. So you usually want to write into your grant proposal like, well, such and such, say like if I was going to be a fiscal sponsor, Agri Academy is going to be our fiscal sponsor, and they're wanting 10% of, the grant funds or whatever, for, offering their 501c3 status. So you usually have to work that contract out with the fiscal sponsor, but in the end, you're gonna still be responsible for the money, how it's dispersed and things like that. They're just allowing you to get the money. So it could be because you don't either have a 501c3 status or you're waiting on that status and things like that. So there's fiscal sponsors out there. There's a lot of nonprofits. There's some nonprofits. This is all they do is they be fiscal sponsors for other, organizations and things that do not have a 501c3 status. So it's a good option, like I say, but usually you have to sign a contract with them and you have to end up paying them some type of fee or something. So anybody have any questions before I go into the 6 types of grants there are? So we have some hellos here. Got Kyra. Marty Anderson said hello. Jacob Kramer Jensen says hi. Hi, Jacob. Arthropod ambassadors, awesome. Nadia, you're super inspiring. Well, hey, how you doing, Arthropod ambassadors? Thank you. Um, Gail Hayden, great subject. Thank you. Terrence Hardage, You mentioned the Chase grant. Can you say anything more about that? I just listed that as a example. Chase offered a grant pretty similar to like the FedEx one, where if you had a new startup business, um, if you had a new startup, they would you could apply for that grant, and it was like a voting process. Just kind of, it was just like the FedEx one almost. So thousands of people went and applied, and then what happened is what they did is that they went and applied, and then they closed it off for people to apply. Then you have to go in and you have to get people to vote. And if you get the most votes, then you go to another round, and then they would have you like do a pitch of your business, and the top 3 businesses would they go and meet somewhere, and they would actually compete for that. So, um, it was very similar to the FedEx one. I didn't see the Chase one last year. I know they did it 2 years ago. That's why I didn't really put the picture up there, because I haven't seen it advertised. But FedEx is one. Um, like I said, the Royal Neighbors Foundation, that's for women. Um, but there's a lot of them out there if you just look. It's usually like some big company or corporation that's offering those business type grants. Is it Naima? I'm not sure I say your last name. Dehore. You asked, said, "Hi, what's the website you mentioned earlier?" Are you talking about the individual grant one? That was the Pollinator Project. And like I said, it has nothing to do with insects or bees or nothing like that. It's just called the Pollinator Project, I guess, to, get you started. And they offer $1,000 grants. Grace Blue says, "Hi, Nadia." Hi, Miss Grace. How are you doing? Thank you for doing this. Yo, you're welcome. All right. So, any other questions? Terrence Hardage says, "This is great information. Thank you. You're welcome." All right. Well, let me go on, and we'll pick up any other questions that may come up. All right. So there's 6 common grants. Oh, hold on. Jacob asks, is that for Ohio specifically? No, none of the ones I've mentioned are specifically for Ohio. So the Royal Neighbors Foundation is a national uh private organization. Royal Neighbors is actually a life insurance policy holder and things, but they also have a foundation where they actually offer grants for women in business in various different times throughout the year. Um, the FedEx one is a national one. The Chase one was a national one. So all these are national. Um, but I would suggest you also look in at your state and local like foundations, organizations, and things like that. Uh, and see if they're offering anything in your area for, individuals, grant of nonprofits, businesses, and things like that. Because right now there's a lot of money being, offered around for these grants. COVID-19 has created so many different opportunities, whether it be for medical, food, school, um, internet, rent, all types of housing, all types of grants are being offered right now that I know if people don't know how to apply for them, they're just going to miss out on the opportunity. So that's why I did this. But no, they're not specifically for Ohio. Those are national ones that I mentioned. The Pollinator Project is also a national one. I think that's actually an international one. So Naima says, could grant writers add their fees into a grant? For instance, if the organization does not have funds to cover the writer, thanks. They normally don't do that because even if you have a grant writer that writes your proposal up for you, that doesn't guarantee you're going to get the grant. So a lot of times they'll charge you a fee prior to them writing it up. Um, because it's no guarantee that you're going to get it. Even if you have a person that's writing it, they may have gotten grants before, but it's usually up to the discretion of the people that are reviewing the grant proposal that you submit. Um, they you know they are the ones that are determining whether you're going to get this money or not. So grant writers, no, they usually charge you a fee up front, and you have to pay that fee up front for them to actually write that proposal up. So it's kind of like a gamble because it doesn't guarantee you're going to get it if you even have a grant writer write it up. Terrence wants to know, how can I find out more about housing grants? I'm not sure. I just see things a lot of times in passing, like when I'm on the internet, because I'm always looking for grants to write up proposals for. Um, so you just have to do a search, see if your state or local governments are offering any type of grants, see if any foundations are offering for housing. Um, you just have to look for them. I'm gonna talk about federal ones because we have the HUD and all that type of stuff. But there's a strict criteria you have to go through before you can even apply for federal grants, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I don't know any specific housing grants because that's not really the area that I really look into. So you have to do a search for that yourself. All right, so there's six common types of grants. There's general operating grants, there's program or project grants, there's capacity building grants, there's capital grants, there's endowment grants, there's matching grants, and then there's federal grants. So general operating grants. So general operating grants provide maximum flexibility, which means you can use these funds unrestricted to cover overhead expenses and administrative fees, or you can spend the money however you want to spend it. Um, the Royal Neighbors Foundation grant that I received, I could spend it how I wanted to for my business. So I could spend it on, if I needed to buy equipment, or if I needed to buy or pay for, maybe rent, or I could use the money how I wanted to see fit for my business. It wasn't a specific thing that I had to spend that money on. Um, General operating grants are rare, but they do exist. Again, you're gonna have to do a search for one. Um, what I want to say though is when it comes to grants and you guys see like an announcement, don't just always instantly jump on it just because you see, oh, they're going to offer $50,000, because what happens is your project has to line up with whatever that person that's offering that grant money. You have your project has to line up with what their purpose or their mission is. So if your mission is to, or your project is to feed, children at a school, and you find a grant that's $50,000 and it's a art grant, your project doesn't fall in line with that. So you would be wasting your time to write up a grant proposal to submit to them, because you're probably not going to get it, because they may be looking for someone that's looking for to have instruments purchased for a school or something, and your project is you're trying to buy farming equipment, or start a garden or something. So just because it says they offer $50,000 and you just see the money, you need to look at what their mission is, what their purpose is, and things like that. It could be also that their purpose, you don't like what that grant, or that organization that's offering that grant is even, you don't even like what they do. So you probably won't want to get involved with things that are not in line with what your purpose, or what your mission, or what your project is. That'd be like me trying. I do a lot of science and agriculture stuff, and I'm trying to get in. With a, I don't know, another art thing, or music, or it just doesn't fall in line with what I'm doing. So I would be wasting my time to write up a proposal to submit to them. It's gonna waste their time reading it. It's gonna waste my time wasting the time to write it up. So just be mindful of that when you find a grant proposal, read through it, and uh read through the proposal and see if it lines up with what you're actually trying to do. But back to general operating grants. Like I said, these are rare, but they do exist. Royal Neighbors Foundation was one of those where you could use the money that you got for, in this particular thing, for my business, Kiwi Produce. I was able to spend the money how I saw fit for my business. All right, program and project grants. Program or project grants are the most common types of grant awards. They are more restrictive, since grant funds can only be used to create, support, or grow the programs or projects described in your grant proposal. The projects they fund are more likely to align with the grant maker's own mission, and it is easier to evaluate the impact of the grant award. So, you know, if there's a person, and it's an organization, and they're offering $20,000 grant and they're wanting someone to combat food deserts. I would jump right on that one because that's what I do. That's my mission too. I'm trying to, end food deserts. I'm trying to teach about, agriculture and things like that. So I would jump on that opportunity. Now, say your mission was, or your project was you want to end, cruelty to animals. Well, that would not fall in line with what that grant uh, maker was, looking for. So again, your project has to fall in line with what the grant is asking for so you can be successful in even getting funded. Um, it's just a waste of time for you to write proposals up and you do not meet those criteria. Also, if they say you have to have, like, the 501c3 status, you have to have a budget, you have to have, like, your if it 99 if you're a nonprofit, it's a form you have to file every year, 990, with the government, saying like your operating costs and things like that, and if you had gotten any any funding or anything like that. If they're asking for that information and you don't provide it, that's going to make you most likely not be eligible to get that funding. You also need to look at, when these grants are showing up, how many have they funded in the past. Now, if it's a new thing, they don't have any past data. But if they have funded some in the past, you can look and see, like, they might have had 150 applicants, but they only had enough money to fund 20 people. So, it's going to be a very competitive grant. So you're going to have to, step your game up on your proposal, so you can put yours out front. Also, look at the deadline. Like, if you see a grant and it's due, you know, tomorrow, and you don't have anything rolled up, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to be able to write a very effective proposal by tomorrow. Um, that will most likely get funded. So you have to know those types of things. All right, capital grants. So capital grants are aimed at constructing new facilities, renovating an existing space, or purchase costly equipment. This equipment could be equipment for furnishing or other major material purchases. This can be for renovations, refurbishments, remodeling, rehabilitation, for outdated facilities. It's also construction of new facilities, land purchases, and capital campaigns, formal approach to major construction projects. These can also be matching and challenging grants for capital campaigns. So basically, these are, grants that are used to, build infrastructure. They're called, construction or infrastructure grants also. But basically, this money will go to developing and building a new facility or renovating a facility. So that's what the money will have to go towards. It couldn't go towards, um, buying, a computer or something like that. That would not fall in line with what these capital grants are for. So endowment grants. So endowment grants help establish or grow an endowment, which consists of a reserve of money, usually substantial in size, that has been set aside for perpetual use. Uh, so any principle that's established on this particular type of grant is it's invested, and your organization gets to draw funds from a percentage of the interest earned on that investment. The capital and endowment funds often used by universities, nonprofit organizations, churches, and hospitals. It's generally utilized for specific needs or to further a company's operating process. Um, so, if you get endowments, if there's grants, that money would go into, like, an account, and it would, they let that money sit there and generate interest. Sometimes they'll actually take that money and invest it into things like the stock market and things like that. So that money is making more money. And then any money that's made off that money, that organization would, create their own grants that they can fund other people's projects and things like that. So it's very common for, um, like, universities. I know, what's that? Harvard, they have, like, one of the hugest endowments of all college universities here in the United States. Um, so they have, like, millions and millions of dollars in this endowment. So that's why they can, fund different projects and things on the college, or they can, fund student led things and all that type of stuff because they have a huge endowment. But other smaller organizations and things, they can establish endowments as well. So there are grants that can help establish these, um, but they're not very common either. A lot of times, if an organization is going to become an endowment, they're going to become an endowment by getting donations and other things in, that they eventually build that money to a level that they can create this endowment fund, and then they can use that money to invest and then actually grant it out to other people. All right, so matching grants. Um, an individual organization matches funds. So an example of a matching grant would be a grantor will reward a nonprofit $10,000 if they can raise that same amount. So, say a nonprofit got $10,000 from another, whether they raised the money themselves or they filled out another, grant proposal and they were funded $10,000, then if this organization does matching, they would match their funds dollar for dollar. So this matching also doesn't always have to be monetary. So they can be in-kind donations. So in-kind donations are, items like, clothing, real estate, cars, all types of things can be made into in-kind donations. So if it's doing a matching in-kind donation, it would be like, something that's worth $10,000. So say the organization, they needed like my case, I need a tractor. And so if I raise $10,000, um, they could actually, say an organization had a tractor that they could donate to me that was $10,000. They would match that, and so I would still have my $10,000, but now I also have that tractor that I was trying to purchase and things like that. So that's how they go about matching with in-kind donations. All right, so federal grants. Federal grant is an award of financial assistance from a federal agency to a recipient to carry out public purpose of support or stimulation authorized by law of the United States. The federal government awards grants to organizations including state and local governments, universities, research labs, law enforcement, nonprofit organizations, sometimes businesses, and very rarely and those businesses have to be small businesses. They can't be big, huge corporations. It's usually small businesses. And very rarely they do offer grants to individuals, but that is very rare. Federal grants are very competitive. The intent of most grants is to fund projects that will benefit specific parts of the population or the community as a whole. So a lot of grants right now are out for COVID-19 and to combat the many issues that have been created by COVID-19, whether it's food shortages, medical, uh, you know, medical needs, small businesses, all types of stuff that have suffered because of COVID-19. The federal government has created all these grants. But I always hear people talking about the federal government always offers free money to individuals to start a business and stuff. And I talked about that earlier. They do not. The money's not free. Uh, if you've never filled out a federal grant application, you have no idea. I would suggest you start out with your local applications, learning how to, if you've never done a grant before, a grant proposal before, learning how to write one up and things like that before you even try to tackle a federal one. It is very intense, and they want everything. They want to know how much you're going to spend, when you're going to spend it. They want to know it broken down by quarters. Then you have to write up, the actual proposals. And we're going to go through each one of those parts of the proposal. But you have to, you have to do research and data and all types of stuff. So it's better to start out with those smaller grants so you can build up to this one. But to even apply for federal grants, you have to go through this whole vetting process, and it could take up to 6 weeks because I went through the whole process. Um, First of all, you have to get that EIN that I was telling you about. You also have to obtain a DUNS number. So the EIN, I don't know where they got the 35 days from, but if you do it online, for the most part, it takes about 10 minutes. Now, if the system is down and they decide where you have to have it mailed to you, that might be where the 35 days is coming from. But for the most part, to get the EIN number now is very easily. Um, the DUNS number, I've seen that take longer than 2 days. I've seen that take up to 2 or 3 weeks. Then you have to register on SAMS.gov. And that's the government site. So if you're actually awarded a fund for a proposal that you submitted, your funds are going to actually go through this SAMS.gov website, and it's going to be dispersed out of there. And you have to go in there and you have to write reports up. And this is where you also you have to check the status of your applications and things like that. Um, but to do that, you have to go through this long drawn out vetting process. You have to go and get stuff notarized. They have to go and they do a background check. They make sure the address that you put on there is the correct, like, post office address. Because when I went through this whole process, I forgot to put the suite number on my office, and they rejected my application until I went and wrote the suite number on there. I had to resubmit. It took them 5 days to look it over again, and then it went on to the next step after that. So it took 6 weeks for this whole process. I had to go get stuff notarized. I had to submit paperwork. I had to show them that I had the 501c3 status. I had to show them my EIN number. I had to fill out the applications. Had to set up the accounts on sam.gov. Then I had to register as an authorized organization representative. You have to mail this stuff. It's somewhere in Kentucky that you have to mail it to. It's some federal office there. And then after all the stuff is mailed, and they do these. Oh, they even check you to make sure that you're not a terrorist group. Like, all these different federal organizations, they will do a thorough check on you, and that's why it takes so long. And then once that's all done, then they will let you know if you pass clearance or not. And if you didn't, this is what you have to work on. So it could take a long time. So if you see a grant on there and, like, the due date is July 1st, and you have not gone through any of this process, I wouldn't even bother trying to even apply to that. For number one, the application is gonna take you the freaking month to write because it's so intense. But you haven't even gone through this whole process yet. So I wouldn't even try to apply for anything. Like, if you see something on there, you can't just simply go on there, click it, and apply to it. You got to have all this done. You got to have all these accounts set up. Then you can actually apply. So when people tell me, like, "Oh, the federal government, it's just easy. Just go in there and just go in there and submit a grant," I know they've never done that stuff before, because if they did, they didn't go through this whole vetting process. They didn't. So I know they didn't. They've never actually applied for a federal grant. Like I said, but it's very intense. And then, um, when you see a grant announcement on grants.gov, um, those usually have where they'll have like a webinar where they'll go through the whole RFA, or the request for proposal. Um, and what it is, it's usually like this 20-30 page document, and they go through it through that webinar slide by slide, explaining each little section, what they're going to look for. I mean, they give you everything they want. uh, they'll say in the introduction what exactly they want in the introduction. They'll say what exactly they want in the objectives and things like that. But it's very intense, and you got to make sure that you're using the same wording that they're using. Like, an example would be, if you're targeting socially disadvantaged populations, and they say socially disadvantaged in their wording, you need to use the word socially disadvantaged. You can't say minority. You can't say, blah, 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 or however else you want to categorize that. You have to use the same exact wording that they use, or they will throw out your application. So, like I say, it's very intense, and it's a lot of work on those grants. It usually takes you a month to, pretty much um, get it together, and that's usually what they give you about a month to prepare and submit it. And then you have to submit it online. You have to convert everything to PDFs and all that. And then they have this online system, like, for your budget. You have to type in the budget, but then you also have to submit the budget in the PDF. So it's very, 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 very intense. So if somebody says, "Oh, just get a federal grant," and, like, yeah, y'all have never done that before. All right, so some places where you can look for grants is grants.gov. There's other government entities that offer their own grants. I got a SARE grant, so it's an organization under the USDA. You can apply for grants there. So that's not always federal grants are not always on grants.gov. There's other entities that if you go to their website, they may offer grants that you don't have to go to this grant.gov process. But even with those, you still have a process you have to go to. You have a criteria you have to meet and things like that. So say it's housing, you might want to go to the HUD and see if they have HUD um, grants on there and see if any of them are not part of the grants.gov part. It might be some office there. They have some separate whole grant system where they offer smaller grants versus these big grants that are usually offered on the grants.gov. Yeah, the grants.gov grants, they're usually like $50,000, $100,000. And like I said, they're very competitive. And a lot of times, bigger organizations like universities and stuff are their first preference to give money to. And a lot of times smaller organizations, they may or may not get them. So you just have to think about that. Here in Cincinnati, there's a place called the Greater Cincinnati Foundation, the Dater Foundation. You also might want to look at private foundations like Royal Neighbors, FedEx. Um, I mean, just go on Google and just like type in, I'm looking for a grant, and say what's your project. It's like trying to kind of put a general search in there. If your project's like, food or education, and see what pops up. And then, see if you meet that criteria of that particular place that's offering that grant. It could be, some grants are specifically for, a certain city or things like that. So you just got to look at through the criteria. And so that's why I say contact local organizations. Sometimes, sometimes individuals, they'll offer grants and things. They'll put up like maybe might be a small $500 grant, and they want you to submit, um, some type of project or something to them. So I mean, grants are out there. You just got to be resourceful. And you just got to really look for them. Because they're not just going to pop out and write themselves. So you got to look for them, and then you got to make sure you meet that criteria. All right. So any questions before we talk about parts of a grant proposal or application? So this part might be a little boring. I don't have any pictures or anything. Because I just want you guys to understand the different parts of a proposal. And every proposal does not have these parts. And some grants, they don't even have all these questions. It depends on that grant, the grantee, what they're wanting. So some grant, they proposals, they want 20 pages. And then some of them, they just want you to answer, what's your project, who you are, if you're a nonprofit, what's your EIN, um, um, when do you plan on starting your project? It could be a very simple application, and then some of them are very drawn out. Like I told you, those grant.gov ones, those government ones are very drawn out. There's a lot of pages. Most of those projects, you have to write a 20-page proposal, and you got to have figures, tables, budgets, timelines, all types of stuff. So just know that every grant is different. Grant proposal or application is different. So you just need to look at that and know that. All right. So most grant proposals or applications, they have a cover letter, a summary, an introduction, um, a needs or problem that you're trying to address, the goals and objectives, procedures or the scope of work, a timetable or that's timeline, a budget. They'll want to know the key personnel that are going to be working on the project, how you're going to go about evaluating your results and things, and then you'll have like an appendix, and we'll go through each one of these sections. So the cover letter should contain a summary of your proposal, introduce your organization, and summarize any recent communications you've had with the funding organization. Include the amount, excuse me, the amount of funding that you are requesting, the population it will serve, and the need it will help solve. Try to bring your project to life in the cover letter and actively engage your reader. So, a summary. The summary should include information for those readers who will not read the entire document but who will need a summary of the proposal. Although this section appears first in the document, it is usually written last. The summary should remain on a separate page and not exceed one page. The summary should contain the following elements. It's a brief identification and purpose of your organization, or if if it's a proposal for an individual, who you are. It also should have the purpose and the anticipated end result of your proposal, or in this case, of your project. It should also have the type and amount of support requested, and it should have the total anticipated budget and other information you deem pertinent. Again, it cannot go over one page though. So it's just a synopsis of what you're planning to do, how you're planning to do it, and if you got that funding, how that funding would be used. All right, so parts of a grant. So the introduction. All right, so introduction. In the introduction, you want to introduce your organization. It's best to begin by explaining how and why your organization was founded. It is also a good idea to provide a mission statement so that your readers know who you are and what you do. Your introduction can include information such as the purpose of your organization, a description of its activities, a description of its target population, and the evidence to show that this is a healthy organization. Also, in the introduction, you're going to introduce your actual project. So you want to, if you're trying to target, I don't know, dogs, you want to introduce what the purpose of your project is. You're trying to save dogs, or trying to prevent, you know, dog populations out in the wild by coming up with this whole spay and neuter program and things like that. So you need to present in the introduction what your project purpose is, as well as what your organization has done, in the past that would make them uh you make your organization a valid uh organization to actually fund if that project had, if your project is funded, if you can actually carry out that project. So they will actually need to know what your project is in that introduction. All right, so needs and problems. Uh, you need to identify the needs and the problems to be addressed. This includes the target population and any statistical information that you may have. So again, if you're talking about the dogs, talk about statistics like there's so many dogs, stray dogs that are out here, and this is why the spay and neuter program is needed because we have so many strays that are running around, and we need to control those populations and things like that. Um, you also want to think of ideas for information include are length of time needed, the problem, how long the problem has existed, whether the problem has ever been addressed before and what the outcome was, the impact of the problem to target population, and the impact of the problem to surrounding populations. All right. I wish it wasn't loading like this. It's annoying. So goals and objectives. So you want to state the desired goal and objective to address the need and problem stated above. So the needs that we talked, like the needs, we need a spay and neuter program because we have a population of dogs taking over this area. So the goal is to spay and neuter 100 dogs. It might be 1,000 out there, but we might be only catch 100 of them. So we want to make sure we can spay and neuter 100 of those dogs. And so we're going to go about doing that by doing a trapping, and once we capture the dogs, we're going to try to adopt them out if they're able to be adopted out. So your goals are to reduce the population of stray dogs out there through a spay and neuter, but also, actually get them adopted out so they have homes, so you have less dogs on the street. So your goals and objectives have to be clear, They also have to be measurable. So like when I said you want to do 100 dogs, um, you would love to do 1,000, but you know you can actually do 100. So you have to have your goals and objectives. They have to have a clear where they can be measured. So it has to be some quantitative value. So scope of work, it provides detailed information about proposed procedures, if available, in the scope of work. This includes information on activities such as recruiting, training, testing, or actual work required. So how are you going to go about carrying out the project? So what you're going to need to carry out the project, how long you're going to need to carry out the project, who's going to work on carrying out the project, and things like that. That's what the scope of work is. It's kind of like it's just your directions on how you're going to go about doing this project. And after that, you're going to want to create a timeline. So the timeline, it usually provides detailed information on the expected timetable for the project. Break the project into phases and provide a schedule for each phase. So phase one might start phase one, depending on what your project is, it might, phase one might be just buying all your products or your supplies and things. You're hiring people if you need people for the project. You're getting everything set up. So that might, say it starts in January. So from January to March, that's the whole process. You're going to hire, you're going to set the whole project up and things like that. Phase two, you actually start executing the project. So you've hired the people, you've got them trained, and now you're going to start, going out in the community and doing whatever the project is. So phase two might take place from April to November. And then phase three could be, now you're going to start winding that project down depending on how long the project is. You Whatever it is you're going to have to do in phase three to shut the project down, you'll go through doing that. So you need to have a timeline of how long your project is going to take. um, and so knowing that, that'll also tell you how long, it'll tell the person that that you're applying for the grant is this project even, are you able to even do this project in a timeline that we're going to actually fund it? Because some grants, they might cover a year worth of cost, but your project might be a 3-year project. So it probably wouldn't be wise for you to get a 1-year project if you know you're not going to get to the bulk of your work until year two, and they're only going to cover year one. Um, maybe be able to explain in that proposal, like, we need those funds for year one because we have to buy the products and things for the project in year one. But, year two, we already have funding lined up for that, but we need this funding for this first year to get this thing established. So you got to have that timeline, and it has to be a clear, concise. It doesn't have to be exact, but it has to give an idea of like how long this project is going to run, and is it going to run in a time frame that you'll have funding for it. All right. All right. So the budget. Budget, state the proposed cost and budget of the project. Also include information on how you intend to manage that budget. So phase one, you have to say your upfront costs, hiring costs, things like that. Phase two might be operating costs. Phase three might be shutdown costs. But you have to have a budget, and you have to say what money is going to be allocated during this time frame. So what money is going to be allocated for phase one, what money is going to be allocated for phase two. However many phases that your project has, it can go beyond 3 phases. But you need to have a budget spelling out how the money is going to be allocated, how it's going to be used. And then, if money isn't used for a specific task, why wasn't it used for that task? And things like that. You're going to have to explain that, especially when you do the reports and things. And then sometimes, depending on the grant, sometimes they may want you to either give back the money that you didn't use up, or you're going to have to put it towards something else to the project so that you don't have to give it back. So writing up that budget, that helps you out a lot, and it's also required for most grant proposals in the first place. The evaluation part, it discusses how progress will be evaluated throughout at and at the end of the project. So say your project, whatever it is, you're gonna have to do some type of evaluation. So how do you know you're getting the results that you want? So there's gonna have to be some type of testing, quizzes, whatever the project is. You're gonna have to do something that's gonna give you it's gonna have to evaluate, is your project or your program, is it effective? And so then you're gonna have to compare those results from the beginning, when you first started, to the end. These are the results we got. Was it effective? What did our you know did our reading program, were we able to effectively reach the population we were trying to get? And then we reach those numbers? And that could be, offering whoever's in that reading program a reading test or something, giving them a beginning when they first start the program, giving them an evaluation on how effective they can read, and then at the end, if they can read more efficiently now. So you have to have some type of evaluation to know how well your project is going, and is it even effective. All right, key personnel. You need to list the key personnel who will be responsible for the completion of the project, as well as other personnel involved in the project. So this could be project, program director, supporting staff, future staff, and other things. So this is part of your proposal that you'll have to have in there too. You'll have to list those people. You have to list their qualifications and things like that. A lot of times when it comes to the budget, you'll have to list how much that person is going to make, if they're going to be paid out of that particular funding, what their gross income is going to be, and things like that. So the appendix, this provides support and material for your proposal here. So the appendix part, you'll put things like resumes. Say you were provided some type of data. You might want to put tables, maps, and things into your appendix part. Um, it depends on what the actual grant application is asking for. You'll want to put that in the appendix. Like when I applied for one of these federal grants, I had to put my CV in there. I had to put the data that I used, that I collected for this area, for the project I was trying to do. I had to put tables, all types of statistical data in that appendix part, because it couldn't be put into the actual written part, because you had to submit it online in a little box. So um, a lot of times too, they might actually ask for a whole PDF of your whole proposal, where you've written it out in, proposal presentation. They'll want to see that whole proposal to see, number one, if it's the same thing that you submitted online, and things like that. So again, you have to know what they're asking for. So you really need to read through those applications very thoroughly and make sure you're covering all bases, because if you don't, it can actually eliminate you. It can have your application thrown out. And those federal ones, they are very specific about that. All right, so follow up after the grant. You need to note the report date. So say you are awarded in a grant, you need to know what days you're going to have to report back to them your progress. So if you have a 3-year grant, but every year you have to give a progress report, you have to write a report up, and they're due on a certain date. And then they have to look over it, and sometimes that will determine if you're going to get the next allocation of your funds. A lot of these grants, they don't give you all the money up front. They break it off into, either quarters, or however they're going to break it off. So you have to write a report up saying, I did such and such during the quarter one, such quarter two, and then they'll say, okay, we approve your report. We're gonna, cut you your next check, and then they'll send the next money or the next funds out. If your report doesn't meet their qualifications, you're gonna have to go back and either edit their report, or it may be that, you just don't get any more funding, because you're not keeping up to speed with what you said in your proposal. If there's anything that comes up, like, COVID-19 came up this year, so that kind of affected everybody's research projects. Like, even with I have a project that I'm doing with SARE, where I had to, do bee research and stuff. And COVID-19 kind of messed some stuff up because I couldn't order a lot of my products and things that I needed to carry out my project. So I'm gonna have to do an extension where I have to extend my project another year. And so some grant grantees, they will actually, uh not grantees, grantors, they will actually allow you to extend it, but they have to offer that to you. So they offer for that particular project, they offer a 1 year, extension. So you need to know what happens if something comes up where you can't carry out the project in the time frame that you said you were going to carry it out in. What are your options? And so that should have been spelled out in the application. But if it wasn't, then you'll have to talk to the grantor and see, like, well, how can I extend this out and things like that. So um just know that. Also know when you apply for these grants, just because you apply, that doesn't mean you're going to get it. Like I told you, most of these are very competitive, and they, they might get hundreds and hundreds or thousands of applications. If they have to go through all of those, and then, like I say, if your project doesn't fall in line with what they are, looking for, they're gonna instantly throw yours out. Or if you don't have all the information they were requesting, like if you don't have if they were saying they wanted something in the appendix, like your CV, your resume, or you know, maps of where you're gonna have your project take place and stuff, you don't have that information, that'll get you thrown out of there as well. So just know that it's very important that you have all the information that they ask for so that you can be considered for the grant. And then, grants are reviewed. Sometimes they'll interview people that they want to give money to. They'll interview you to see, how sincere you are about your project and things like that. Or if they have questions, they may do an interview, and then they decide, and then they'll either contact you either by phone, by mail, by email, but they'll tell you in the application how you will find out if you got the grant or not. So with that, just know that just because you will fill out those 20-page applications, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be funded. Um, I've filled out a lot of grants applications and wrote a lot of proposals, and got a I got a lot of no's. I got some yeses too, but I've got a lot of no's, and it can be kind of devastating, especially when you're filling out these huge ones, and you know never just put all your eggs in one basket. So don't ever just settle for that one grant you apply for. Apply for a lot of them. You might not get the $50,000 one, but you might get three $10,000 ones. So that money will help you with your project. But don't just stop at that one, because that one's not guaranteed. Sometimes grants, they might have had the funding and something came up and they had to take that funding away. Federal grants are like that a lot. They'll have allocations of funds, but if something happens and they have to put those funds towards something else, they'll totally eliminate that whole opportunity. So you just need to be mindful of that. Or they might cut the budget, or so that means they'll cut the funding. I've had grants where I submitted for a certain amount. They only funded part of my grant, so you have to be mindful of that. So just never put all your eggs in one basket. And then also, make sure you're following up and doing what you need to do if you are awarded a grant, so that, if you apply again, if they offer it where you can have it for another year or so, or they can keep it coming in, making sure you're staying up to speed on your reports and stuff. That'll, make them more willing to, keep funding your project. All right. Did anybody have any questions? Because that's the end of that presentation about, grants and what they are and the different parts of them and things like that. Any questions? All right. So, um, real quick, you can visit my school website. I'm gonna upload a sample proposal so you guys can look at it. Um, to see how these parts were written, so you can use it as an example of how you could write yours up if you're having to write one that has all these different components. um like I said, all grants, proposals are not like this. Some of them are, they might even have more questions than what are more sections than what I even mentioned, and then some of them might only have 2 or 3 of those sections. But you need to read through the whole proposal to make sure that you're, meeting the criteria and things like that. um, so if you visit the school website, it's www.kiwiproduce.farm/courses. I'll have that information up there by this evening. I'll upload it. Um, but if you can also visit the website, I have classes and other courses and things on there if you're interested in various different subjects that you can, purchase and learn from. So that's on there. Also, again, if you'd like to support my channel, you can do so by visiting PayPal, NadiaRuffin@gmail.com, Cash App, # Nadia Ruffin, or if you want to become a patron on Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/Urban Farm Sister. If you need to contact me, you can email me at urbanfarmsister@gmail.com. Or you can visit the school website. I need to change that link on there. It's courses, not school. Or you can find me on social media. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram under Urban Farm Sister. So nobody had any questions? Hi, Amina. How are you? No questions? Nothing? Well, if nobody has any questions, if you have any, you can send me an email. I'm going to end broadcast now. It's a little bit after 8, so I only want to go an hour, so I just went a little bit over. Thank you guys for tuning in this evening. Again, if you'd like to support my channel, please do so. If this information was helpful and you'd like to support me, I would really much appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in. And again, if you have any questions, just send me an email. All right. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.